Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to make a strong, lightweight bow platform for a Carolina skiff. Now this is a 16-foot Carolina skiff. It's a project boat that I bought. It had a bunch of little fiberglass repairs that needed to be done. The guy drilled a bunch of holes through the hull to mount rod holders, and there was some damage in the back. Even extra holes drilled through or under almost every cleat. Nothing serious, just a few fiberglass repairs. But while I was doing these repairs, especially up in the bow section, I very quickly realized that I wanted to add a bow platform. The bow on these skiffs curves upward, and it's really an unusable space. You can't fish up there without slipping. So anyway, I also noted that it's got a rail or a ledge on both sides. It's the same ledge that you would mount seats further aft. I'm going to use that ledge and mount my bow platform. I want to make this without using plywood. In the past I've done some work with fiberglass over plywood, and historically, no matter what you do, over time they're going to get wet, they're going to get heavy, and eventually, 10 or 20 years later, they're going to delaminate. I did not want to add the extra weight. I wanted to keep this lightweight and strong. I made a template out of cardboard, and then I went down to the local fiberglass supply house and I found this really cool honeycomb material. It comes in sheets 4x8, very flexible, but when you laminate it with fiberglass and you put mat on one side and biaxial on the other, it becomes very rigid and very solid. I did a whole separate video on how to work with this stuff, how to actually laminate both sides, put it together, seal the edges, etc. I'll put a link to that video right on this one. This video, I'm really going to concentrate on making the bow platform, and I'm just really going to give an overview of the whole process. So when I bought the 4x8 sheet, it didn't fit in my car, and I made the mistake of cutting it in half. That was a big mistake because half of the sheet is not big enough to make the bow platform out of one piece. So I ended up having to piece it together. If you can get it in a truck and do it in one piece, it'd be a lot easier. I also realized that no matter whether you're working with plywood or with this honeycomb material, making one of these things is a lot more work than buying one already made. So if you have the opportunity to buy a factory-made bow platform, absolutely worthwhile. These are the two pieces. I'm cutting them. I'm going to mount them together. I cut away the laminate from one side and then the core and the laminate from the other, so they kind of fit or slide together. And then I just put some fiberglass putty and some fiberglass mat on each side and let them dry. Then I ended up with one long piece. I then wanted to add some stabilization to stabilize this a little bit and give it a little bit more strength. So I wanted a vertical piece at the aft end of the platform. I could have done this with a separate piece, but I decided to try to bend the honeycomb material so that I'd end up with a nice round edge on the top layer that was easy to fiberglass over. And I think I went about 4 inches or so with this lip. Now you can see here I've clamped on a piece of wood, and then I'm just going to slowly apply pressure and bring that up to a right angle. Now it's not going to stay there. I ended up having to make a little jig, really just a piece of 4x4 that I screwed both sides into. The 4x4 held it in position. Then I put some fiberglass putty, and I'm using a little popsicle stick type paint stirrer that I found at Home Depot. I use that because the radius that it gives is really nice for running fiberglass over. Once the putty dried, I did run glass on both of those little ends, and then I removed the 4x4 and glassed that whole inside corner. I also added some stringers made out of the same honeycomb material, just to give it some extra strength. A couple of my friends that I fish with are kind of big guys, and I want this platform to hold their weight. I puttied that all in, and then I fiberglassed over each one of those stringers. Even so, and at this point I've actually added some additional height to that fold-over piece so that it would run all the way to the deck. I figured it would even have more strength that way because I'm transferring the load to the deck. Even so, it's still very lightweight. I can easily maneuver it. Now this is one of the test fits. You know, almost every piece that I did, I test fitted it again, make sure that it was gonna, you know, fit the way I wanted it to fit. The bottom edge, this is going to be the edge that mounts against the deck. You don't want to leave the honeycomb material raw, so I gouge it out, and I just used a angle grinder and a flap sanding wheel for that. Create a groove, and then I'm going to fill that groove completely with fiberglass putty. I happen to like the Bondo brand fiberglass putty, but you got to make sure you get the one that's made for fiberglass. It's got fiberglass strands in it, and it ends up being very, very strong. I applied that. You could use a putty knife or a paint stirrer, anything you want, just to get the putty packed into that groove. Once this stuff dries, you can go back with a sander or a disc grinder and just round over all the edges if you want to run glass over it. I took that whole platform and I glued it in with that same fiberglass putty, and using that same popsicle stick type paint stirrer. So I created a nice curved radius everywhere where the platform is now attached to the hull. So now I'm going to sand not only the platform, but also the top of the gunnel, as well as that putty. Get everything smooth, no little pockets of where air could be trapped. And then after I sanded it, I used an 80 grit on an oscillating sander. After I sanded everything, I wiped everything down with acetone. And this is just to make sure that when I fiberglass it, everything's going to stick together. So after fiberglassing it, and I secured it to the hull or to the gunnel with biaxial, which is a combination of matte and woven. So this thing is very strong. Then after that, I just rolled on gel coat. You know, I wiped it all down with acetone. I filled in some voids with fiberglass putty. And you can see I mounted my rod holders as through deck rod holders. So there's no drilled holes through the hull. I mounted a bow cleat. I know other people say that that's a trip hazard for fishing, but for my application, I like it. And Carolina skiffs are kind of rough glass to begin with. They're kind of a pickup truck of boats. So the glass work that I did kind of matches the rest of the hull. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this short little video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYeasycrafts.com. Got a bunch of boating and nautical related do-it-yourself projects on there. Thank you very much for watching.